If you and your friends were trapped inside an abandoned cannery with an ill-tempered old serviceman possessing inhuman physical strength, what would you do? Popeye is what he is, and that's all that he is. And in this case, what he is a deranged lunatic bent on violently disassembling anyone who so much as sets a foot inside his run-down industrial hideout. Yes, it seems the once cheerful, upstanding icon that taught an entire generation the value of proper nutrition has made quite the transformation since hitting the public domain. And if we don't stop this freak show soon, it's only a matter of time before the hero's once beloved brand becomes damaged beyond repair. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Doom Sailor in Popeye the Slayer Man. Adrian likes the nose candy, so much so that she ripped off a couple street toughs for their entire stash. And as you could probably imagine, they're not too happy about that. This brings us down to the Anchor Bay Cannery, where our girl is currently running for her life from the all too predictable consequences of her own actions. Now, it's unclear where or how this chase might have started, but Adrian's definitely not doing herself any favors by trying to lose them in an abandoned part of town. After all, a terrified young woman being chased by violent thugs is definitely gonna turn some heads, but not if there aren't any heads to turn. Oh well, I guess we'll just have to assume that she didn't have a choice. One thing's for sure though, there is absolutely no point in trying to smash through a padlocked door with nothing but a small rock. Sure, McNally might pick these things like peaches, but when it comes to physical damage, even the cheapest of cheap padlocks can soak up quite a bit of punishment before they pop open. I mean, hell, a .44 Magnum probably couldn't bust that thing, so realistically, she would just be losing her head start. And besides, if this entrance to the building is chained shut, why wouldn't the others be as well? Adrian could easily wind up cornering herself in there if she can't find another way out. Granted, yeah, a building this size is bound to have plenty of nooks and crannies for her to hide in, but I can 100% guarantee you that neither of these creeps have to get up for work in the morning. They're gonna keep looking for her until they find her, and they might even have backup on the way, so if Adrian can't or won't call for help, she may very well just be forestalling the inevitable. Meanwhile, all she really had to do was break line of sight in the neighboring industrial park and focus on creating distance, at which point it would be nigh impossible for the thugs to tell where she went. In fact, Adrian had already done the first part long before reaching the locked door, so were I in her shoes, I would have blown by that thing altogether and simply swung around the other side of the building. We find out later that the cannery is part of a large complex of warehouses and factories, creating a veritable maze of twists and turns that she could use to escape. Once inside, it would just be a matter of zigzagging between the buildings until she either made it back to town or found a more suitable hiding spot. You know, maybe one that wasn't literally the first large structure that she came across. But because Adrian wasted all that time screwing around with the padlock, the thugs managed to catch up just in time to spot her shutting the door behind her. Now, not only do they know exactly where to start looking, they're also close enough to hear her clanging around all the old catwalks inside. This makes hiding effectively pretty much impossible, and thus, the only remaining option is to fight. Of course, without some kind of force multiplier, squaring up against two larger and stronger opponents is probably not gonna work out for her, so we'll need to find a weapon. You know, like that length of chain that she dropped after opening the door. Seriously, you know these guys are gaining on you. You know they mean business. And you know getting cornered is a strong possibility. Why wouldn't you at least bring that thing along in case things get ugly? Will it be enough to turn the tables? Probably not, but you're guaranteed to lose if you stay empty-handed. And sure enough, Adrian's failure to plan ahead leaves her totally helpless upon getting pinched. However, just when it looks like she'll be paying them back in blood, the sound of an empty spinach can rolling across the floor lets the lowlives know that they're not alone.
Ah!
Yeah, maybe you should have let the unknown interloper reveal himself before you started acting tough. At least then you might have had a chance to assess the situation fully and decide whether it was really worth picking a fight. Spoiler alert, it was not. And yet, despite the sight of his friend popping like a month-old whale carcass, scumbag number 2 somehow thinks that he actually stands a chance with his teeny tiny knife. Like, dude, look at his forearms. For Christ's sake, he's gonna twist you apart like a breadstick. Forget the human shield. Now's the part where you shove that chick straight towards him and run like hell for the exit. Also, keep in mind, this same guy was just freaking out about the rumors of a bloodthirsty maniac who prowls around the cannery. Obviously, those rumors are true. So if you think appealing to empathy is gonna get you out of this one, you are dead wrong. And now you're just plain dead. What I gotta wonder though, is why Adrian wouldn't hit the road while her attacker was getting the Omni-Man treatment. Sure, maybe the freak's on your side, but if not, you're really not gonna like what happens next. So why wait around to find out the hard way? Ultimately, it's unclear what exactly becomes of Adrian following this encounter, but given we never see her again, I can't imagine she fares that much better. And to think, all of this could have been avoided had she simply fed her addiction the old-fashioned way. After all, pawn shops exist for a reason. Fast forwarding a bit, we find a group of 30-year-old 20-somethings arriving at the cannery to investigate the legend of the so-called Sailor Man. At the helm of this operation is Dexter, who is neither a genius nor a serial killer. However, what he may lack in brains, brawn, charisma, or any kind of discernible talent, he more than makes up for with, I don't know, friendship? I mean, he was able to drag 4 other people into this nightmare, so that's gotta count for something, right? Anyway, let's meet the rest of the crew. First up, we have Lisa and Seth, who only showed up so they could sneak off together while constantly spouting half-baked innuendos. I'm sure they'll both totally make it out alive. Next, we have Katie, whose violently possessive and unstable boyfriend is sure to arrive at the worst possible moment and make everything worse. And finally, we have Olivia, who literally just saw the Sailor Man watching them from the window and said absolutely nothing about it. For real though, you can't tell me she didn't see him up there. And even if she didn't think it was really him, you gotta remember, they're not supposed to be here. This whole documentary is to be filmed while knowingly trespassing. So if there's some kind of watchman inside, they could all wind up catching a charge for breaking and entering. Oh yeah, there's also the possibility that whoever Olivia saw in there isn't supposed to be here either. And without knowing his intentions or capabilities, they could easily find themselves walking into a situation that none of them are equipped to deal with. Whatever the case, this is definitely something the others should know about before going in. So the fact that she chose to say nothing seems rather odd, or dare I say, suspicious. But more on that later. For now, the team gains entry after picking the replacement padlock and begins setting up their equipment. Once that's out of the way, Dexter decides they need to split up to cover more ground, which is always a good idea when exploring creepy abandoned buildings.
You did not just say split up in an abandoned factory supposedly haunted by a murderous ghost?
See, Lisa gets it. Okay, alright. I get that there's no way they could possibly know that the Sailor Man is actually real. As far as they know, this whole thing is just your run-of-the-mill ghost adventure type beat. So it does make sense that they wouldn't be overly concerned about getting singled out. That said, even discounting the possibility of running into Popeye, there's still a few reasons why splitting up doesn't make a whole lot of sense. For starters, they only have one handheld camera. Sure, Dexter has a handful of trail cams that he could distribute amongst the group, but what will they do once they're planted? Are you honestly telling me the plan was to have Lisa and Seth yell if they saw something spooky? This place is a freaking maze. Even if Dexter somehow is able to accurately pinpoint their location, there's no way that he'd be able to make it there in time to catch something on camera.
I'm sorry! Oh, I forgot to put a timer! I forgot to put a timer!
And yes, yelling really is the only option. As it turns out, cell reception's fairly poor throughout most of the building, and since our fearless leader didn't think to bring portable radios, they're pretty much hosed when it comes to communication. This is also why it doesn't really help them all that much to have Katie stay back and watch the trail cam feeds. On the one hand, yes, she could certainly tell them about anything that she might have seen once they get back from patrolling around, but until then, she's basically useless. And of course, it also doesn't help that she spends the whole time mindlessly staring at her phone instead of watching the monitor. I mean, look, there's Popeye right there, right behind your friends. But I guess no one gets to know about this because you're too busy scrolling through hamster pics. Way to go. Still, there is a counterpoint to all this, in that splitting up like they do would allow the non-filming team to scout for potential clues and points of interest. So it's not a total waste as it concerns the documentary, but given the primary goal seems to be catching ghost activities on camera, it doesn't seem likely to move the needle that much. And that is 100% because Dexter totally failed to plan this out correctly. Think about it. Dude had to know going in that the best way to use their numbers would be to split up. In that case, the obvious move would be to set them up to work independently. Sure, 4K digital camcorders like the one Dexter has can be fairly pricey for someone on a college student's budget, but you can easily rent one from various websites for a fraction of the cost. As for comms, a few cheap Baofeng radios from Amazon would be really all that they'd need, and if budget's that big of an issue, you can always sell them off to airsoft LARPers once the project wraps. And last but not least, why not buy a bunch of chem lights that they could use to breadcrumb their path throughout the facility? A 50-pack of 12-hour glow sticks cost like $40, and they could easily save the team a ton of time that would otherwise be spent stumbling around in the dark trying to retrace their steps. These are all extremely simple things that require very little lead time. And even if you have to wait an extra day or two for a package to arrive, I mean, it's not like this place is going anywhere, right? Well, actually, it is. Unbeknownst to our filmmakers, the cannery's owner recently decided to sell it off to a developer intent on leveling the place. And wouldn't you know it, here comes the buyer's representative now, in the middle of the night, when no one is supposed to be here. Then again, that's probably the point. Earlier that day, she dropped the purchase agreement after getting jump scared by the plant's security guard. So I can only imagine she decided to sneak back in to spare herself the embarrassment. But, like, why though? Was it written in blood or something? Just print off another copy and send it off in the morning. As a matter of fact, why even bring it to the cannery in the first place? Obviously, the owner's gonna have it reviewed by legal counsel prior to signing, so it should have just gone straight to his office. There was literally no legitimate need for either of them to ever set foot in this dump, much less carry around important documents. But whatever. Miss Harrigan ultimately finds the agreement without any trouble, so I guess it all worked out. Well, almost. She still has to make it out of here without getting splattered, and judging by the headless corpse of the security guard propped up against some crates, that's gonna be easier said than done. Not impossible though. Back during her meeting with Mr. John P. Cannery himself, we could clearly see two different exit doors within a very short distance of where she dropped the folder, one of which she already used to gain access to the building. Now, on this particular trip, Harrigan came in through the same sliding door that Dexter and company used. But there's no reason she has to go all the way back there. Looking at the other doors, they both seem to employ standard doorknobs with manual deadbolts, so there'd be no need for anyone to chain them shut from outside. And worst case scenario, they both have large windows she could easily break through without too much difficulty. So yeah, were I in her shoes, that's exactly where I'd be going right now, especially after seeing the very off Sailor Man blocking her original path. Of course, it's easy to see how someone might panic when staring down a living ghost story, but does she panic? So much so, she even forgets to shut off her phone light while trying to hide in the dark. Gosh, you know, I wonder how we found you. However, what really does her in is the aimless running. Without a clear escape plan in mind, the unlucky lawyer winds up heading deeper into the cannery, where she's forced to fight against a partially blocked door. And while she does eventually manage to squeeze through, it's not exactly a clean getaway. Nice haircut. Okay, jokes aside, I'm obligated by YouTube to inform you that Popeye merely pulled off Harrigan's wig topper and then proceeded to pour delicious Hershey syrup all over her head for added humiliation. This causes her to collapse to the ground out of sheer embarrassment. and definitely not because of blood loss or the shock of excruciating pain. However, the sailor man's hijinks don't stop there. Dude runs a tight ship, and he's not about to let some legal eagle leak chocolate sauce all over these filthy concrete floors. It's a slip hazard after all. And so, with safety in mind, Popeye gently throws Harrigan over his shoulder and delivers her to a nearby trash compactor, which is also full of chocolate syrup. See, look at all of it running out after he turns it on. Classic family-friendly content. Anyway, back across the building, the film crew continues their search for anything, even remotely interesting. Evidently, this place is large enough that Harrigan's screams didn't reach them, which doesn't bode well for any of them if things start getting crazy, and they are about to. It all starts when Katie walks in on Sailor using the monitor to spy on her friends. Lucky for her, there's nothing blocking her escape. And since Popeye clearly doesn't know how to run in this universe, she's able to quickly break contact and go look for the others. Of course, were I in her shoes, the only thing on my mind would be leaving the cannery as quickly as possible and sending back help from a nice, safe distance. I mean, let's face it, this place is huge. Katie said it herself. So what are the chances that we'll be able to find our friends and warn them without running into you-know-who? Probably not great. Wouldn't be a problem if we had radios though. Just saying. Unfortunately, before Katie even has a chance to get her bearings, she runs into her psycho high-maintenance boyfriend, Joey, and his weird little toadies. Turns out, they've spent the last several hours drinking heavily and feeding into his insecurities, which naturally resulted in them mobbing down to the cannery to see what's really going on. Honestly though, it's a good thing that they did. Well, maybe not for Katie, but in general, having more people to die screaming from Popeye-related injuries could help alert the others. And if nothing else, it'll keep them busy for a minute. And I do mean a minute, cause these guys aren't exactly pros.
Guys?
Bro, the shoulder? Really? Dude's got a good eye. Stab him in that. Or, you know, just run away. I mean, obviously, the man that you're dealing with is not a normal human being. So for all you know, you can't even kill him at all.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Oh, and now your head's on backwards. Imagine that. Well, so much for him. But maybe henchman number 2 will do a bit better. He does have a pistol after all. Although, I gotta wonder why he wouldn't squeeze trig while the maniac was busy rearranging his friend. This isn't turn-based combat, lummox. You could have easily planted one right in his face. Of course, it also doesn't help that he forgot his gun was, in fact, a gun. And as such, capable of hitting targets from a distance. All he had to do was take a few big steps back while the freak was occupied, and he might have been able to pop some off. Then again, it probably wouldn't have made a difference either way. Turns out the piece was actually just a Umarex 9XP air pistol. Fortunately for Terry, old Popeye lets him off with a broken wrist, but he's clearly not about to let the job go half-finished. And sure enough, the injured man makes it back to Joey's car, only to find a familiar face staring back through the rear view. Dude's about to give deadlifts a whole new meaning. Still, we all know the real Popeye would simply punch the car so hard it turns into a tricycle, whereas in this case, the pale imitation can only manage to suspend the drive tires less than a foot off the pavement. Pathetic. This isn't Popeye. This is just some asshole in a costume, and that means he can be killed. In fact, we actually got him right where we want him. All we gotta do is keep our foot planted firmly on the gas pedal and roll right over him the second he gets tired. And if by some plant-based miracle he manages to survive or jump out of the way, we're already in the car. Just step on it and leave him in the dust. Simple as. Seriously though, you couldn't ask for a better position right now. Well, okay, you could ask for Bluto to show up and shoot him with a grenade launcher, but still, dude's literally stuck there. And yet, for reasons that simply cannot be explained, Terry decides to abandon the vehicle and take off on foot. And you know what? Fine. We're outside now, so he can't box us in. I just stick to the main road and try to gain as much ground as possible. If it looks like he's starting to catch up, We'll wrap around some of the buildings and break line of sight. That said, given he still has 6 other people to torment, I think that there's a good chance he'll give up the chase if we get far enough away. I mean, think about it. Someone would have had to have gotten away from him at some point. Otherwise, how could anyone have heard about him? But no, I guess Terry's just gonna commit to running aimlessly through the complex, which always goes so well for people in his predicament. This, of course, results in him getting cornered out on the docks, but not before impaling his foot on an upturned nail. Honestly, it's really not looking good for him no matter what he does at this point. But why wouldn't you at least try jumping into the water? Sure, Popeye would still probably tag you in the head with an anchor while you were side-stroking away, but it's not like you'll live any longer on land.
Anchors away.
See what I mean? At any rate, back inside the cannery, it turns out Katie's screams from the head showdown finally managed to reach the others. And while it's unclear to them what exactly might have caused her to panic, there are a few conclusions we can reasonably draw based on available information. First off, upon returning to her last known location, Dexter and company find the trail cam monitor lying flat on the table. To me, this is an indication that someone or something must have either attacked her or forced her to flee, during which time either she or the unknown entity likely knocked it over. And yes, it had to be some kind of hostile third party, because if she had fallen or gotten hurt while searching for a bathroom, or gotten caught up in some kind of machinery, or something, there'd be no reason for the monitor to be tipped over. So next, let's think about the scream. It was one long, loud, blood-curdling sound followed by total silence. This suggests she's either incapacitated or hiding somewhere, meaning whoever or whatever caused her to scream is almost certainly still present. After all, if Katie had handled business herself or otherwise realized that the danger had passed, one would expect her to return to her station or call out to her friends, neither of which have happened since we heard the scream. And finally, we need to consider who might be responsible for this. Having yet to find any evidence that the legend of the Sailor Man is true, there's no legitimate reason for our heroes to believe that he was involved. However, all 4 of them would have seen Joey's highly aggressive behavior back when they picked up Katie. It's clear he suspected that she may be sneaking off to cheat on him, and even as unreasonable as his suspicions might be, it seems incredibly likely that someone of his character might seek to act on them. Analysis. Joey and his 2 dumb friends, who are also total creepazoids, must have shown up to confront Katie and then attacked her. And if they were willing to physically harm her over this, it stands to reason that they'd be willing to do the same to her friends. Or at least just Dexter. Question is, how should we react to this assumption? Well, considering we may be dealing with as many as 3 possibly armed assailants, we need to stick together as much as possible and head outside to see if we can find Joey's car, or any other indication that he or someone else might be inside. Along the way, we'll want to look for anything that we can potentially use to defend ourselves with. By the looks of it, this place was pretty much left as is after being shut down, so there's a good chance that we'd be able to scrounge up some of the old maintenance equipment. It's not ideal, but hammers, pipe wrenches, and even screwdrivers and utility knives are all better than a fist when push comes to shove. Combined with our flashlights, we could blind him while we're going in for the rib shank. That said, escaping the cannery remains our top priority, so if nothing's readily available, we'll just have to go without. No sense in stumbling around, just to maybe have a chance at finding something that might give us an edge. And besides, once we get outside, fleeing the scene entirely will probably be our best option, depending on what we find out. Of course, you and I know that Joey's car will still be parked outside, as long as Popeye didn't move it. So our assumption about Joey being involved in Katie's disappearance would be well supported by the evidence. In that case, I think the most reasonable course of action would be to load up in our own vehicle and retreat to a nice safe distance where we can call for backup. Sure, the cops might be minutes away when Katie needs help now, but given our lack of training and equipment, the sheer size and complexity of the building, and the fact that we know basically nothing about the situation, I can't imagine the 4 of us are really the best people for the job. Unfortunately, it seems that Dexter disagrees, and just to make matters worse, he decides that they need to pair off yet again in the hopes of finding Katie faster. And were it only a matter of finding her, that would be a great idea. But it's not. You people have absolutely no idea what's going on or who else might be in here. And even if you were 100% certain that no one else could have come in after you, that still doesn't rule out the possibility of Katie running into hostile squatters or even a criminal element using the cannery as a hideout. Right now, all you're doing is dividing your available manpower, all but ensuring that if and when two of you do find Katie, you'll be even less equipped to help her than you already are. This becomes apparent almost immediately when Lisa and Seth discover Jesse's freshly rotated remains sprawled out on the floor, which surprisingly prompts them to make one of the most rational decisions I've ever seen in a horror movie.
We have no idea who else is in here with us. We need to get out of here and find the police.
And here I expected him to say that they should split up even further. Sadly, it seems these two burnt out their last remaining neurons with that realization, as upon finding the entrance door chained shut from the outside, they decide the only other possible option is to try reaching the roof. Now, ordinarily, this is the part where I'd suggest texting for help to potentially break through the dead zone, but according to Seth, all their phones are already dead. How this could have happened in the course of a couple hours when no one but Katie has even been seen using a phone is unknown, but that doesn't mean calling is completely out of the question. First thing I'd try is returning to Jesse's body to see if he brought one along. Breaking through facial recognition would be easy, since the dude's head remains mostly intact. But even if we can't get into the phone, we would still be able to make an emergency call to 911 from the unlock screen. It'd be best to try this back at the entrance, as earlier on we saw Katie receive a call from Joey once she and the others were already inside. However, if nothing else, it'd still be extremely useful to have a working cell phone after making our escape. As for how we'll go about that, it's not nearly as complicated as these two are making it seem. I've already covered the ground level doors spread throughout the facility that could potentially be unlocked from the inside, but we've also seen a number of large windows as well. And while it's unclear as to whether Seth and Lisa might know about these, it stands to reason that there would have to be more than just a single sliding door to get in and out of the cannery. Knowing this, I'd stay close to one of the exterior walls and follow it until we find another way out. Sure, there's always the possibility that we might run into trouble along the way, but it's not like hunting for roof access will be any safer. And plus, it's also a numbers game. There may very well just be a single door leading up to the roof, and that could be anywhere. Meanwhile, there's bound to be multiple doors and windows that we can exit from the ground floor, and since they'll obviously be on the exterior wall, we'll at least have some idea on how to find them. Of course, no matter what we do, it's going to be a lot harder with Sailor Boy hot on our heels, and that's all the more reason why we should avoid crawling around the catwalks, where our movement will be more restricted. Not to mention the fact that it could be much easier for him to corner us depending on the layout of the roof. But no, evidently our heroes are just dead set on reaching the top. Literally to the point that Seth decides to traverse some rusty old ceiling joist instead of simply walking around to the other side. It goes about how you'd expect. Well, maybe not exactly how you would expect, as the dude does wind up surviving the fall. What's even more surprising is the way that Lisa comes happily running up to him, as though he wasn't totally about to leave her behind. Still, I find it strange that they would waste time getting PG when all of 30 seconds ago, they were running from Popeye. Oh well, guess a little FaceTime couldn't hurt. Or maybe it could. And while it's unlikely that either Seth or Lisa could have known the rebar was ready to fall off, none of that would have happened if the dude had just used his brain and found another way out. But wait, it gets even better, as shortly after watching her love interest fail miserably while crossing the ceiling, Lisa goes on to attempt the exact same thing in the exact same place. And wouldn't you know it, she gets the exact same results, albeit without the soft landing. Oof, guess they'll be sticking together. Alright, seriously though, you clearly saw Seth fall off because he wasn't tall enough to reach the joist. What then makes you think that you'll do any better when you're even shorter than he was? Hell, if the others are even half as dumb as these two idiots, Popeye won't have to lift a finger. It'll be Tucker and Dale all over again. I mean, just look at what Joey manages to accomplish mere minutes after picking up the air pistol. Alright, calm down. It's just a BB. Nah, she's actually in deep shit if they don't get help soon. And all because Joey completely failed to identify his target before firing. I mean, sure, it's gotta be hard to see with that mop in his face, but still, get a headband or something. And maybe try opening your eyes. However, while this situation does look pretty bad, there is a silver lining in that the gunshot seems to have lured Popeye into the stairwell. And that means we've got him right where we want him. Or at least it would, had Joey's crappy Temu Wonder 9 not picked this exact moment to malfunction. Based on the click of the trigger and the sound of a shell ejection from his previous shot, I'd say the action likely failed to strip another round from the magazine, or it's a bad primer. Either way, the issue should be addressed with a simple tap, rack, and go to ensure the magazine is properly seated and a fresh round is chambered. But because old Joseph here can barely master a belt buckle, he gives up on the situation entirely, and instead bravely abandons his girlfriend to a gruesome death off screen. That's what's implied anyway. Shortly thereafter, Olivia and Dexter arrive at the scene to find one of Katie's earrings beside a shockingly small amount of blood. Like, way too little to have actually come from such a serious wound. Now, it's unclear whether they heard the gunshot that rang out during this incident. But either way, this should be all the evidence that they need to realize they're in way over their heads. Just like Seth pointed out earlier, the best way to help Katie is to GTFO and call for help. And I think at some level they understand that. Unfortunately, however, this still doesn't stop them from sticking around to explore Popeye's personal effects after coming across his bachelor pad. By the looks of it, things with Olive Oil didn't exactly pan out, and now he lives in this hellhole while she and Wimpy cashes royalty checks. Nope. Check that. She's actually dead. Or at least that's what we're left to believe based on all the newspaper clippings. It's here that we learn the Olive Oil in this universe was a cannery employee turned whistleblower who mysteriously vanished after calling out the company's contaminated products. And apparently Popeye's been squatting here ever since. But like, why? Sure, the scratchings in his notebook suggest he was trying to figure out what happened to her, but don't you think the cannery is the last place that they would be keeping that information? I mean, it's not like he was ever gonna find a piece of paper that says, "We killed Olive Oil, ha 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 ha," and besides, dude clearly had a child to care for judging by one of the pictures. Just saying, that might have been more important. Of course, whatever he was doing here, it still doesn't explain how he changed from a relatively normal looking dude in this picture into this thing.
You're one ugly mother.
Although, let's be honest, it's gonna have something to do with the spinach. And sure enough, Dexter and Olivia duck into cover just in time to catch Popeye cracking a can of glowing green slop. Yeah, I'd say that probably did it. And it seems Olivia would agree, although she takes it even one step further. According to her, the sailor man's spinach consumption explains not only his appearance, but also his proclivity for violence. Thing is, there's no way she could possibly know this without having a good sense of who he was prior to the transformation. I mean, for all she knows, dude was always a nut job, and the lifetime supply of leafy greens only gave him a body to match. In fact, you know what? Counter-narrative. Popeye and Olive Oil were actually never a couple. After all, in none of the photographs strewn about this den do we actually see the two of them together. No, the way I see it, this guy was just another cannery employee who only loved two things: spinach and violence. But then out of nowhere, Miss Olive Oil showed up, and he immediately became obsessed, watching her from a distance, and even stealing the framed photograph of her and her daughter from where she kept it in her locker. This pattern of behavior would continue for quite some time, until one day he found out the girl of his dreams was actively plotting against the cannery. He knew that if she were allowed to continue speaking to the press, it would cost him everything: his home, his spinach, and even her. And so he decided to act, savagely strangling her one night after work, and scattering her remains amongst the thousands of individual cans of contaminated spinach. But the damage was already done. Olive Oil's testimony cost the cannery billions, forcing it to close, and leaving Popeye with only one thing: violence. And yes, I realize I'm making quite a leap in logic here, but so is Olivia, and as far as I'm concerned, that makes this all canon. Well, okay, there's still the possibility that she knows more than she's been letting on. I already mentioned the way that she chose to stay silent after seeing Popeye in the window, and this even happened a second time while they were looking for Katie. Of course, without having seen this himself, there's no way that Dexter could have possibly known about this. But given how quick she was to correctly identify the Sailor Man's hideout, despite seemingly having no evidence that he ever even existed in the first place, dude's alarm bells should definitely be going off. That said, they're still in a survival situation, so it makes sense that he'd want to focus on escaping, especially once they find Seth and Lisa stacked up like cordwood. This leads them back to the warehouse where, at least for a moment, it looks like they found a way out. Little do they realize, Popeye's one step ahead.
Oh! Run! I'll hold him up!
Dude, what the hell was that? Seriously though, you both could have easily run away in the time that it took you to launch your attack. Now Popeye's got full wrist control, and we all know how that's worked out for everyone else. However, just when it looks like Dexter's about to get one hell of an interview, Olivia calls out sternly to the freak, commanding him to stop. And by some miracle, he actually does. Yeah, no, this pretty much confirms it. Olivia's a mole sent by Big Spinach to recover their former asset. I mean, how else could she have known that he would respond to her commands? You can't honestly expect me to believe that she's the first person to tell him to stop. Okay, alright. She's actually just his daughter, or something. And it's pretty clear she knew as much from the very beginning. As for why she felt the need to surround herself with a bunch of innocent people before coming to visit, it's really hard to say. My guess is that she wanted some kind of blood sacrifice that she could use to lure him out of hiding. Then once Daddy Dearest finished ripping through the witnesses, she could take advantage of his fragile mind state and use him to carry out her bidding. If anything, saving Dexter was really just a trial run to make sure that he'd obey. That's what I would do anyway. Of course, now that she has the confirmation, there's no reason to keep him alive. So I'm not sure why she'd then proceed to set his broken arm and help carry him to safety. One thing's for sure though, Olivia's half-baked assumption that Popeye's just a poor misunderstood mutant protecting his home is total BS. I mean, first of all, it's not even his home. Dude's been secretly squatting on someone else's property for like 20 years. That doesn't entitle him to jack. And plus, it's not like anyone could have reasonably known that they were encroaching on his territory just by entering an abandoned building. He's basically a wild animal, and like it or not, that makes him dangerous. Lucky for us, there's still at least one person around here who understands this fact, and he's not about to let the problem go unsolved.
Where you going, sailor boy? I got another one for you!
Well, then why didn't you give it to him? Guy was standing there long enough that you could have easily put a few more shots on target. All you're doing by going in close is giving him yet another opportunity to knock the gun away, especially once Olivia rushes in to stop you. This is, of course, exactly what happens. And while Joey does manage to slip away before the coup de grace, he ultimately makes a fatal mistake by taking Olivia hostage. Well, to clarify, it has more to do with the fact that he chose to pick up an empty spinach can rather than the loaded handgun that was sitting right next to him. For real, it's right there, right by his foot. All he had to do is reach down and grab it, and he could have mag-dumped the reject at point-blank range. But no, dude just had to arm himself with garbage, which naturally results in Popeye beating him to death with his own arm. And with that, Dexter and Olivia are finally free to leave the cannery via one of its numerous available exits. Once outside, they run into Katie, who is somehow totally fine. However, while our heroes might be out of harm's way, there is still one last crucial decision left to be made. Do we tell the cops about Popeye's hideout, or lead them astray in the hopes that he'll evade capture? Well, obviously it's the first one. Look, Joey was a colossal piece of shit, for sure, but the Sailor Man is a literal monster who's been killing indiscriminately for years on end, and that will almost certainly continue as long as he remains free. And even if you're Olivia in this situation, you've got to realize that bringing him to justice is far and away the best chance that he has at getting some semblance of actual help. I mean, just look at him. Do you honestly think that you're in any way qualified to address his condition, let alone the untreated center mass gunshot wound that he received? No, you have to do it, Dexter. Olivia's not worth it. She was playing you from the start to get inside the cannery, and you can bet she would do it all again. Betray her trust, rat her father out to the cops, and become the hero that this town deserves.
Yeah, last we saw he was headed for the docks.
Great. Now they're gonna make a sequel. You have doomed us all. In the end, only 3 of our characters made it out alive, and while some minor deaths may have been inevitable, they could have easily saved Lisa and Seth by sticking together and paying close attention to their surroundings. Furthermore, had Terry and Joey taken full advantage of their available resources, either of them could have very likely taken Popeye out before more lives were lost. For that reason, I think Popeye the Slayer Man was beaten. Thanks for watching, and remember, just because you're legally allowed to iconic media franchises doesn't mean you should.